The main issue right now for food vendors revolves around the lack of permits that are available. So to be a food vendor in New York City, you have to have a license, which anyone can get. But the problem is once you have a license, you can only work on a cart or a truck that has a permit. And back in the early 80s, the city limited the number of permits. There was only about 3,000 citywide permits available, and there's been a waiting list for many, many years, and it's even now impossible to get on the waiting list. If you want to be a food vendor, you can't get a permit from the city. You can risk selling food without a permit, but then that's very dangerous. You can get $1,000 fines, you can become arrested, you can get your property taken from you. Or what most people do is they rent a permit from somebody that has been holding one of these permits for many years. So the thing is that once you get a permit, or once you have received a permit from the city, you have the right to renew it every 2 years. So there are many people who had these permits many, many years ago who used to be vending, but now they're retired or they're doing other jobs, but they still hold the permits. So they rent them out at exorbitant rates, 100 times the price, to people that need to work nowadays. So, it's not easy to rent one of these because you still have to have a decent amount of money, but it's the only way to do it. Once you have a permit from the city, you are allowed to sell on any street that's not restricted. So there's a list of restricted streets. There's hundreds of them in Manhattan, and all the boroughs have restricted streets. So once you find a street that's not restricted, you have to find a legal spot on that street. So in addition to there being restricted streets, there's also restricted places on every street. For example, you have to set up at least 10 feet from every crosswalk, at least 20 feet from every entranceway to any building. There's distances from the curb and from bus stops and from fire hydrants. So there's lots and lots of placement restrictions on where vendors can be. What we're trying to do is we're trying to remove some of the barriers for food vendors and vendors in general. The first thing is convincing the city to increase the number of permits that are available. That's our current campaign right now. And we basically want the city to issue new permits every year for a certain amount of time, so people that have been waiting for permits or that are renting a permit on the black market will be able to finally get their own permit. And that would be an enormous relief for thousands and thousands of people in the city, hardworking, mostly immigrants, that need these permits. And second, what we're trying to do is trying to create some more space for them to work on the street. For example, right now there's a rule that says you have to set up your push cart less than 18 inches from the curb, which can be very dangerous if you're standing behind the push cart. You're very close to the street. We've heard plenty of stories of carts being hit by passing vehicles, and it's actually pretty dangerous. So we want the city to give vendors a little bit more space, so 3 feet of space on the sidewalk from the curb to set up, which would give them more room for themselves, and it will be safer for them while they're working. As we all know, vendors are mostly immigrants, right? So that's a real issue of how they're affected, right? This is already a marginalized community. There's lots of undocumented immigrants that are engaged in street vending, and this is one of the most vulnerable communities in New York City who have other issues such as housing and access to medical care. So street vending is one of the ways that they're able to sort of make a little bit of a living here and get their foot in the door, right? Many of the biggest businesses in New York were started off as street vending, and today's vendors are coming here looking for that same opportunity, but it's very difficult. They may not speak the language, they may not get the same support from the city that they should, so it's difficult for them to sort of get a start, and we hope that we can change some of these rules and change some of these laws to make it easier for them.